Jim Glinsky runs Glinksy Customs out of Austin, Texas. A definite holy mecca for anything related to guitar and any genre. Austin is a hotbed of activity, and I'm positive that his bench is cycling through amazing instruments on a regular basis. Jim's family tree of experience covers a lot of great names in the industry, a lot of great builders, repair specialists, and musicians alike. His stories go way back, and real fun to sit down with him. Enjoy this conversation. Jim Glinsky, Glinsky Customs, Austin, Texas.
Patrick, how are you?
Good. Thanks for joining me. I greatly appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. I'm honored that you reached out to me.
Well, you, sir, are I was checking out your bio recently, and you've got some legend in your lineage, for sure.
I appreciate that. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say legend. I'd say experience.
You are beyond blessed that you're so close to such a hotbed of music and guitar heaven in Austin, right?
Well, I'll tell you, that's the main reason, like how I ended up here. It's I grew up, I was raised in Connecticut, and it's a great scene there. It was a great scene that I was a part of as far as the bands, live bands playing out, things like that. But I've been doing this now for almost 35 years, and never considered it as a career. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I never considered it as a career of something I would do on my own. I've worked for Sam Ash. I've worked for a couple of other companies. Sorry, this is my cat here. He's like attached, like we're twins separated by years. He's like,
I get it. Our cat is the same way. Same way.
And now the door's open and he's like, bam, what's going on? You're talking. But yeah, I never would have considered it just because, I got married, I had kids. It just didn't seem a feasible way to make money,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then just throughout the path of things, I just I'd always done it. I say it as a part-time job, but a lot of times it was more like 2 full-time jobs. It took a long time to get my customer base built up in Connecticut that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved here to Texas in 2018, so that's about 6 years ago, we came here, and it just like I had more than I had in Connecticut working for Guitar Resurrection, a guitar store up in North Austin, more than I had in Connecticut just working through Jim Lehman at Guitar Resurrection in a matter of a year. So yeah, it's definitely a hotbed. And it's funny too, because the way things are going, and Austin's pretty expensive now, as far as
Oh, no doubt.
living in Austin.
Yeah.
And everybody's kind of spreading out into other locations around Austin, smaller
Mm-hmm.
neighborhoods and suburbs of Austin. So the musicians are still here, you know what I mean? It's
Absolutely.
just it's a tough thing. I'm gonna put him outside because he's
Sure,
gonna right in front of the camera, but
Is that a Siamese?
he is. He's
Okay.
He's 5 years old. He was my sister passed away over a year ago, and she was this was her baby.
Good.
I ended up with him by default, and he's just like he's totally bonded to me, which is a Siamese trait. So I love him to death. When I try to work, like thank goodness I don't let him in the shop, because I wouldn't get anything done, because he's always got to be out there. Yeah.
Well, I like letting my dog in the shop. She just lays down over here and just hangs out. Dogs are totally cool that way.
It's like a mini zoo here. We've got 3 cats and 3 dogs, and I've got 55-gallon tank and with fish in it. But the dogs, they'll come out sometimes, especially when it gets really hot. They like to come down and out in the shop and lay on the concrete floor.
You're in Dripping Springs, Texas.
Yeah.
Glinksy Customs. And your website is GlinskyCustoms.com.
That's right.
So is your shop then out of your home, or
Yeah,
a part of your home?
I've converted my garage, or I should say I've converted about 80% of my garage into shop space.
Soon to be 100%, I'm sure.
Well, it could, at this point, I was always saying I really need 100% of it. And even now, if I had 100%, I'm still out of room. So
I know. I know the pain.
The dream is to either put up a shop on our property here, separate from the house, but close to the house. Or just start leasing a space that's, more in the direction of, I'm only about 20 minutes away from downtown Austin.
Nice.
And I'm within walking distance to actually, in the Austin proper. So
wow,
I'm close, but a little bit out here in the hill country, it's a little bit more spread out. There's a little bit more space.
Cool.
So I don't know which way I'm going to go. It depends. I mean, the busier I get, it's a good problem to have, but I just don't know how busy I want to get. I know if I get it's going to be more work that comes in the door and more that I have to handle. And it's, talking about hiring people now. And right now I'm by myself. I handle what I have. So I'm kind of play it by ear and see how that goes.
So your migration to Austin was solely due to the guitar culture. Was that it?
No, it totally was. For years.
Did you have other cities in mind? I mean, was it like, let's see, Nashville, Memphis, New Orleans, Austin?
No, I'll tell you the precursor to it being a guitar-based move was the fact that me and my wife wanted to move somewhere that was warm someday.
Right.
Because growing up in, being raised in Connecticut, it's, it's not Maine or New Hampshire, but it's pretty bad. And I mean, it's winter, I love the snow, but after a while it gets old and you clean it up and you get ice on the cars, ice on the roads. And it's just something we thought that we had wanted to do, and I had worked around the time I started doing this as an actual business, which was around 1990. I also started working for a company called Bolt Technology, which is a company that made seismic research equipment. I started there working a saw. I was just cutting raw material. And I had been there when I left for about combined 25 years, I think. I'd left for a period of about 5 years. But I had kind of done that, and I was still, doing guitar stuff. In around 1990, I had been playing guitar, for maybe, 10 years at that point. And I just got to be the guy that people would come to. I would work on my own stuff, and always ask me, how'd you learn how to do this? And I would love to say that I worked with somebody, or I worked under somebody, or I worked at this place, or I worked at that place. But the way I learned how to do what I do is by messing up a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the way of it. And I got to be the guy in our kind of like little circle of musicians in that part of Connecticut that people would come to for stuff, and I worked at Bolt, kind of worked my way up. I was started on the saw, then I went to the CNC department and I was running a CNC lathe. Cool. And then, I was running a flatbed CNC for a while.
Wow. And what year was that?
That was, I started there in 1990. And so throughout the 90s, I kind of like worked my way up, and we have this one small shop in there that was, they called it the polymer department, but it was basically an electronics encapsulation department. And they made these solenoid valves that they used to fire this equipment. It was electronics, but it wasn't crazy PCB type stuff. It was pretty basic. And the guy that did that ended up getting promoted into a sales position or something. So I expressed interest in going in there, and I worked in there for about 5 years. So I kind of
tinkering with guitars. Always had guitars in the background.
Yeah, still
playing in bands, being part of the music scene.
Yep, I never pushed the repair thing back then. People would come to me, and word of mouth, it would be like, hey, I bring, my guitar here, bring it to him. He can do it, So I was kind of growing both of them at the same time without even really knowing that I was growing a guitar business. It's just something I did,
And I have to ask, in the early stages, Jim, did you find that, I mean, this is pre-YouTube, right?
Mhm.
So you really probably had to do a lot of exploring how to find
Oh yeah.
solutions to
Oh yeah.
problems, right?
No, big time. I tell you what, YouTube it's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
It is.
But I love having YouTube. I use YouTube now. I mean,
You do.
there's things, I mean, I pretty much do everything now.
Mhm,
But I'm
mhm.
always just kind of like starving for, well, how does somebody else do it? And that, we'll
Right.
get into the Luth group, I'm sure, in a while. You're, in this group of people that are, anywhere from a level of beginner to just like you to people that have been doing it forever, so
Mhm.
you've got all these levels of experience and all these different perspectives to come at from things. And there's things that I thought, okay, I learned how to do this,
Mhm.
like fretting, for instance, like refrets. I remember I got, I ordered Dan Erlewine's, I can't remember what it's called. I still have it, the refret book, whatever it is. You're going to show it, aren't you? That's the one. That's the one. I don't
Yeah.
know what edition that is, but I'll tell you this.
Second edition. Yeah.
When I ordered mine, I had to call. There was no internet.
Wow.
It wasn't the
Sure.
website. I called and
Sure.
yeah. But it's like for that, once I kind of got doing that to where I felt I was comfortable doing it, I figured, okay, check that off. I'm done with that. And that's kind of like my first mistake is that, there's a billion ways to skin a cat, right? And some of them are better than the way you do it. Some of them might not be. Some of them are better, but maybe you don't see it, and sometimes you got to try things,
Sure. And just take elements from everything and create
I've
your own version.
always crowned with a 3-corner crowning file by hand.
Okay.
And I still do that a lot now. But even recently with, I don't know, it was a couple years ago when StuMac came out with the Z file with that different profile. And I was skeptical of it because I'm so embedded and comfortable in how I know how to do it. So I finally, bit the bullet and I got one and tried it. And I like it. It works. It does what it's supposed to do. I'm kind of embedded into what I do,
Okay.
But there's other things that I've done where somebody else has kind of enlightened me to how to do something. And it's like been a game changer, So it's kind of a balance, you can't really ever look at one thing and just say like I'm done, you know what I mean? So I kind of grew just kind of like figuring out how to, okay, so I can do that now, so now I can offer that to people, and then after I think I was working on primarily electrics till maybe the mid 90s, and then I started more into acoustic stuff, and I was always interested in woodworking itself.
Yeah.
Not even how it relates to guitar, but obviously the two connect in a huge way. But I've always been interested in woodworking, so I'd get stuff that was broken, or something that was trashed or whatever, and be like, well, play around with it and let me see what I can do,
Sure. And isn't it in that shift to acoustics for me was such a leap of faith because I was really it seems so fragile compared to a solid body electric, which is really hard to mess up. And it was like, God, I swear if I apply too much pressure here, this thing is going to split in half or who knows what, But once you make that leap of faith, it's like, well, son of a gun, it's actually a really forgiving instrument. And it's very pliable. You can do a lot to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that goes along too with not only just acoustics, but like older guitars, older acoustics.
Oh God. Yeah.
And, I used to, when I started kind of getting introduced into getting stuff like that to work on, for me, it was always, it would always take me like 8 weeks to finish a job that should have taken a week, because I was just paranoid about touching
big gloves.
Yeah, this is a museum piece. I can't, and I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened, but I did get over it. And to me, the way I look at it is they're all guitars, they're all just, some of them are worth more money. That's true.
True.
But they're all guitars. And,
that's right.
Once you get to a certain point, you get a comfort level and a confidence level. It's not just about, say, knowing and having the experience, like I know how to do this now so I can check it off. It's acquiring the ability to be able to diagnose things, and feel comfortable with, wow, I've never saw this before, so how do I approach this, and then you start looking at things. And I think once you get to that point, you're pretty much free from, having the fear of, I'm going to screw this up. Although it's always possible, and it happens to all of us, you know what I mean?
Right.
But, it certainly gets to a point where, you just kind of like, it's like a doctor's office, man. It's like the next one comes in, you get it on the bench. Okay, what do we need to do? You got to do this, you got to do that. I also used to be telling people, your guitar needs X amount of dollars worth of work, like if it's expensive. I used to kind of shy off from that. And sometimes I even cut my prices thinking like, man, I don't want to tell this guy, he's going to pay $1,500 to get this thing playable again,
Right.
And it's
right.
just adds, especially with acoustics, it just adds up. I mean,
Yeah.
Acoustics seem to be, to me, the guitars that sit in closets. At least from my experience.
Isn't that true?
And an acoustic sitting in a closet is going to do way more harm to it than an electric sitting in a closet. Although it's bad for it too, but things dry out, and you get braces are cracking, tops are split, and pick guards are curling up and pulling the top and cracking and bending things, and it's awful, Yeah.
And I always hate that. You're right that a customer brings in something and says, how much to get that done? But when you look at the guitar, you're like, wow, okay, I can do that, but Jesus, it needs like 3 or 4 other things to be a fully functional. I mean, I can do this one thing, but you're not going to be happy with it.
Yeah.
And I hate that, but it's almost it feels like a bait and switch. It's like, I'm not the car mechanic that's going to try and sell you on a whole new engine,
It gets more complicated too, because when you get things like, I got a call the other day from somebody who's coming out next week. I think it's his grandfather, who's still alive, and he has I think it's a 1948 Sherwood,
Wow.
an old day. And he's like, yeah, it was a college graduation gift from his parents.
Wow.
Well, he's had it forever. He says, and it, I'm pretty sure it needs a neck reset, needs all this, needs that, and it's like, we'll bring it over, but when it has sentimental attachment, there's another element in there. I still feel funny about, I don't try to talk people out of things. I don't try to talk them into things. I just try to tell them, this is what I need to get it playable. This is what I have to do.
Okay.
So I, of course it's just a phone call. I don't want to get into like, well, the guitar is only going to be worth so much.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that's important information to give them, because if, there's a lot of things that go into them making their decisions, I have I'm working on, it's actually almost done. It's a 46, 46 or 48. I think it's a 46.
Wow.
46 Martin 015. That the woman brought it to me, and it was her father's. He had passed away like 10 or more years ago.
Wow.
And he had bought it brand new when he got out of the service.
Wow.
And it's been a part of their family. He played it every Sunday. He's taken it to events. It's just been a part of their life. And he told her his dying wish was to play this guitar, and she said it's
no pressure.
Yeah, right. So she's now getting to like saying like, I'm going to bring it to somebody, and we went over things, and it needed quite a bit of work. I mean, it needs the whole, the whole gamut, for Martin. It needs a neck reset, it needs a refret, the bridge.
Wow.
Actually, I tried to save the bridge, but it was just split where it's got a through saddle, so it was pitched forward, and it was. So I'm going to have a pretty decent piece of Brazilian that I could use for the bridge. So it just needed everything, but it does something like that. Like, I know when I'm talking to the customer, they just want it done. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I just lay things out. I tell them, this is X amount of hours, this is X amount of hours, this is X amount of hours. Here's my shop rate, and that's what it's going to cost. And people, are like, wow, the guitar's not worth that much if it's like this Sherwood or something. Well, then that's their choice, But it does, like I said, it adds another level of complexity into, determining, and dealing with customers. You know what I mean? It's just as simple as a mechanic where it's like, your transmission's bad. You need a new transmission. It's going to be, $4,000. Oh,
right. Right.
That's bad news, but there's not much to that. It's a little bit more complicated with our field, you know.
It is because, well, someone could say how much to install a new set of pickups. Well, it depends. Do you have push pulls? Do you have a toggle? Do you have all this extra rigmarole? I mean, if it's 2 humbuckers and 4 knobs, yeah, let's go for it. Here's my rate. But here, so you kind of have to give them a starting rate. It starts at, but then
everything has prices. It always starts at. It starts at. Because, like you said, you just have no idea where you get. I mean, you know, somebody could, you know, look at your website, and if you have prices listed, you know, they might see that, oh, a pickup swap costs X amount of dollars, and then they, you know, bring you a 335 and want 2 new pickups put in it, you know. You know, well, that's a little different, you know, or
that's right.
Yeah, same thing, you know, like, oh, I got a bad jack, you know, can I just can you fix it quick? And you bring it in, and it's, you know, it's a hollow body, you know, and you're like, well, it is usually quick and easy, but that's going to take a little bit, you know.
Sure. So what's the wildest repair or mod that you've ever seen? Are there any that just stick out like, Jesus, you won't believe what the hell this guy did to his guitar? Like, I recently had an interview with Barrett Culpepper of Southeast Guitar Repair, and they posted on their social media a guitar that had a bullet hole through it. And it was like literally through the neck. I mean, so that'd be an easy, but nonetheless, wow.
It's right. Like, what caused this? Usually it's a fall. It's not a bullet, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
I've run into a lot of weird stuff, man. I've had, you know, I had a guy call me years ago, just, you know, wanted pickups. He's got a Gretsch. I can't remember what it was, a country gentleman, something. Wanted pickups put in it. No problem, bring it by, whatever. Comes to bring it by, and there's like, looking at the F holes, and there's like, it looks like there's like gaff tape underneath the F holes. Like, it's just black.
Like it's sealing it off.
Yeah, and I'm kind of weird looking at it too. And so he's talking, and I'm just kind of touching it, you know. I'm kind of like putting my finger on it too. And I was like, well, what's going on here too? And he goes, man, he goes, I was getting a ton of feedback, so I filled up the body with great stuff, that foam insulation.
Oh, Jesus. And that could literally expand the body of the guitar.
It was full. Yeah, and it did. There was cracks. There was, it was I don't know Gretsch either. It was, you know, I mean, maybe it was like, I don't know, 90s, you know, Gretsch or something like that. It wasn't.
And he put the tape in there to keep it from squirting out of the F holes.
Yeah.
That's oh my God.
Yeah. He said, I had feedback and this solved it. And I'm like, man, like, do you ever think of shoving a pillowcase or something in there? Like, I mean, so that's a weird one. I had,
and what did you do?
I didn't take it. I said, no, I said, I can't.
Wow. Refusing service.
Yeah. I said, I said, for me, my only way of dealing with this, and I'm not going to do it, is I got to take the back off. And then I'd have to blast all this stuff out of there. And that stuff is like, it's like cement, man. It sticks to everything. You know?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, no, that was a so I don't know if that really falls into the category, because I didn't really.
Sure. Absolutely falls into the category. That's insane. What some people do to their guitars is really, truly sad. Honestly.
And I get it. It's things are done out of necessity, and
true.
With your limited experience of knowing what you're doing, fix it. He didn't have feedback, right? Well, now, you know, I think he wanted pickups. It might have been that there was a scratch. There was something there. I can't believe it into the pots, but you know what I mean?
Oh,
maybe
it's true, right?
You know?
Yeah, right. Good point.
Yeah. And it's funny, you start seeing it like in places, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It's just that was pretty horrifying. There's a customer of mine that I've gotten since I've been down here. I met him through Guitar Resurrection. He's a big customer of theirs. Is Jason Mozersky. He's the guitar player for Ben Harper.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he's lived in Austin all his life, I'm pretty sure. And for a while, when, you know, I don't know if I think it was when he started playing for Ben, he had moved to LA. and he got to know Bill Asher pretty well. So I don't know if Bill Asher built him this guitar or if he just bought it from him and he had built it for someone else. But it was basically a Bill Asher's version of a Coodercaster. So it had the lap steel pickup in the bridge, right? Which is the string through version, right? So it's a lap steel pickup where the strings go through the pickup. Kind of like the cover on a Rickenbacker, like a 4001 bass.
Oh, okay, sure.
And then it had like I guess the definition of a Coodercaster is then it has the like a Tasco gold foil in the neck, you know, one of the gold foil pickups. So he brings me this guitar and it's got an original, I think it was like a Supro pickup or a Valco. It was an older pickup.
Oh, wow.
And he said, you know, I had Jason Lawler make me an exact replica of this pickup. So I want to put that pickup in. All right, cool. Easy enough, you know. So take the strings off, run them out, you know, because they run through the pickup, take them out. And I had to be so careful with this pickup because the bobbin, I don't know what the center bobbin material was, but the top and bottom it was basically like a pressed cardboard, a very thin pressed cardboard.
Ooh, whoa.
And it's something that it's probably pretty rigid when it's new and when it's untouched, but the more you handle it, it just starts to get weak, you know? So I took it out, put in the Lawler pickup that he had. He picked it up, had it for maybe a month, brought it back, and he's like, you know, the Lawler pickup is really good. He goes, but it's just not, there's something about that. He goes, so I want you to put the other one back in. I'm like, oh, I'm playing with that thing again, you know? So did it, you know, kind of, and I didn't want to get into anything my mind started working like, well, how can I shore this up? Is there something I can do? And
right.
I just had to take my time and be careful. And I did tell him, I said, look, I put it back in. I said, if you ask me, this is the last time this pickup's coming in and not anything, or it's just need a rewind, which isn't a horrible thing, but you know.
Right. Have you ever rewound pickups and potted them and all that yourself?
I've never done full rewinds or anything like that. I've taken a lot of coil wire off just to kind of trace something back or see if something was, you know, close to that end of it where there could be a problem, but I've never done it. It's something I do want to get into though.
Oh, absolutely. There's a Stumac video. They're doing Dan Erlewine's guitar, and that one guy, he's the geek about pickups and electronics. You probably know who I'm talking about.
You do.
He actually
know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, and he unwinds the pickup to find the break in the line and then rewind. It's like, whoa, that is a different level of that's like the patience.
It's crazy. But it's a thing. I mean, it's a niche thing. Like people,
absolutely.
I know people that do it, that's all they do. But I know a lot of techs that just also do that, you know.
Wow.
And it gets to be pretty diagnostic, like you're talking, you know, like, you know, and sometimes, you know, if you find the break and it's pretty close to one end or another, like I've seen people use the same wire, you know, which can be dicey, you know what I mean? I think that wire's covered in like lacquer or something, and the lacquer, you know, it's like look at a checked finish on an old guitar, you know, it degrades over time. Same thing happens to that covering, you know, on the wire. So once that degrades, the wire starts touching each other. It's, you know.
Do you outsource a lot of your heavy duty stuff like that to particulars in the Austin area?
When it comes to like pickups and stuff like that, I will send stuff to, there's two people that I primarily will send stuff to. Eric Daw is one of them. And then Mike Muscagna back in Connecticut. He makes his own pickups and he winds, and he's a repair guy that he's been doing it longer than me.
Wow.
But I only really do that on things that merit a rewind. So it's obviously older pickup. You know what I mean? Like if it's an old Telly or, you know, an old PAF or something like that deserves having a rewind.
Worth salvaging. Sure.
Yeah, and I'll do that. If it's anything that's not that and it doesn't have any kind of value attached to it, then, you know, it's basically replacing stuff, you know. Like I don't fix Duncan pickups. I'll look like sometimes you get lucky and there's, you know, where the two coils are connected, you find something bad, but I don't get too deep into that stuff.
Okay.
Time to get a new pickup.
That's right. It's just a throwaway
Duncan pickups and DiMarzio pickups and just from that alone, you know what I mean? So
right. Man, I have to say, your social media, your Instagram, you've got a drool-worthy Les Paul on there. That 52 with the trapeze tailpiece.
That was last year. The last year, or the year before, I did that one.
I think so, yeah. And I didn't realize they had compensated. It wasn't like the Les Paul Jr., where it was just a standard tailpiece with the string over the
Well,
wraparound.
that
was that
one,
an addition? Was that added to that trapeze? Or
that
okay,
bridge, man, and the name of it's escaping me. They're super popular. If you have, like I would say like a 355 Les Paul, or any Les Paul, I should say not 355, anything with a trapeze. So like a 52 or 53, those an early 53, those. So the neck angles are so bad on those. That's why everybody they'll take those early Les Pauls and convert them to bursts. They'll reset the neck, they'll drill, and they'll put, a 2-piece bridge on there. But that bridge is designed so that, because the original bridge strung through the top and then went along the bottom of the bridge. So you couldn't palm mute, you couldn't rest your hand on the bridge because the bridge was up top and the strings would come below.
Weird.
And they had to do it that way because the neck angles were so shallow. If they did it, they couldn't get the bridge low enough to get the action down. Or they redesigned it, and they came up with, a different bridge design. So this company makes those bridges, and what it is basically it's compensated like that. It's pretty flat, and there's 2 set screws that you can adjust the height, but basically it allows you to set it down onto the body a little bit flatter. So it gives you a little bit more room to avoid having to have a neck reset.
Gotcha.
And that when that guitar was purchased, it was Dave Biller is a local player here. He's a pro and he's a super great guy. Total gear nerd, loves old Gibsons. I mean, he's got a 57 Junior that I refretted. He's got just really cool stuff. Loves old Marshalls. And he bought that. And that guitar, man, what a storied history that has. Ultimately, pretty clean for an early 52. I mean,
no doubt.
It was really clean, but here was what was done to it. So somebody, first of all, shaved the neck down like almost like Ibanez Wizard thin. They shaved it down super thin. And they also took off the fretboard and replaced it with another fretboard where they shortened the scale length to an odd arbitrary number. It was like, I don't know, I can't even remember. It was like 24 and like 5/16 or so. It wasn't even like, it just seemed very arbitrary to me. What they did is they brought the nut forward, right? So the headstock looked kind of goofy.
Ooh, weird.
I think on my website there's pictures of it beforehand, and the headstock just kind of goes up like this and then like that. So they moved everything forward and they shortened the scale length, and it functioned well. Surprisingly, and it was done well. It was an old repair. This was done a long time ago.
Wow.
They didn't use they used block inlays instead of traps.
I saw that.
It was just kind of weird, So he got a deal on it and he bought it, and he brought it right to me, and he's like, I think I'm going to keep it like it is because it plays all right. I'd love for the neck to be a little bit beefier, but there's not much you can do besides building a new neck or finding a neck, So, I was like, all right, cool. 6 months later, he came to me and he's like, yeah, no, I want it the way it's supposed to be.
Okay.
I get you there, So yeah, so
new fingerboard, everything.
Yeah. They did it right. Like they said, they moved the nut forward, so you'd think there would be a big flat spot behind the nut, but they built a little like ramped up shelf. I don't know why you would do it, but it was done well,
Interesting.
So yeah, so I had to go through that whole process. I had my buddy Tom, Frettie Mercury. He's I've known him for a long time.
Tom Dalia.
I tasked him with making the fretboard for it.
You've probably heard my interview with him at one of my episodes. I did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. I love Tom. Tom's a great dude, man. It's funny when not to get off onto a tangent, but when I started working at Sam Ash back in, I don't know, it was like the 2010, 2015, maybe 16. I can't remember. you know, when I did that, I'd come from doing things on my own at my own pace as they came to me. Thrust now into a high volume atmosphere was quite a learning experience, you know. It's just guitar after guitar. There's just a pile of guitars that never gets smaller, and you just got to keep just chucking away at it, you know. And this he seemed like a kid, but I mean, he was like, I don't know how old he was at the time, 18 years old, maybe 19 years old. And he just hang around, you know, and
that's what he said. He said he used to bug the hell out of you guys.
Well, there's people that would hang around that were a little less desirable than Tom. So anytime anybody would hang around, I'd kind of tense up, you know. I'm like, I got a lot to do. I got stuff to get done.
Yeah.
But Tom would bring me stuff, you know, and he like, I don't know. I think one of the first jobs I did was putting Porter pickups in something that he bought. Tom always bought oddball, weird stuff, not even expensive. Like I remember him buying a Fender Starcaster, like reissue. It was Chinese. It was sharp. He loved it, you know. And it's like, it wasn't a bad guitar, you know. So he's putting Porter pickups in it, and
sure,
I did all the electronics on it. I can't remember exactly what we did, but he started hanging around more, and he just, you know, he was kind of cool about it. You know what I mean? He didn't bug me really. He'd say, I want you to do this. And then he'd ask me if he could watch a couple things. And you know, after a while, they didn't want people in the shop so much, I guess, for liability purposes.
Bummer.
It's still kind of like, you know, with Tom, I'd kind of like bring him into the thing and be like, yeah, well, here, let me show you what I'm doing. And but yeah, I just grew into a like, I never would have imagined having a lasting friendship with him, but I have, and it's been great. I try not to say it because I don't want to sound condescending, but I'm really proud of him, man. He is just like, when I left Connecticut, I think he was working at Sam Ash doing sales. And he was always interested in what I was doing, but he never told me like, I want to do repair work. Like I want to do this for a living. And then, you know, we stayed in touch, and he told me he was going to Gallup. He went to Gallup, and I thought that was cool. He got an internship there. They hired him, like, and now he's running his own business, teaching people, you know, and, you know, being a consultant for CNC stuff. It's just totally amazing to watch his path and what he's done, you know?
Absolutely cool.
Yeah.
It's a small family tree, believe it or not. And then that brings me, Jim, to family tree. When you were with Erlewine, did Dan ever wander through, or was that kind of did they how was that relationship between Dan and Mark?
We've talked about Dan a couple times. I think it's fine. I've never heard anything that I thought that they had a cross relationship or anything like that, but
gotcha. Okay.
I know back in the day, I mean, I think Mark had moved up there, and they started Erlewine Guitars together.
Okay,
that's where the shop was,
and they were was Mark part of the creating of Albert King's V at that point, or would that have been after Mark left? Or
no, that was after Mark left. I think that was solely a Dan thing. That was a Dan. Dan made that for him. I'm fairly certain. But Mark ended up moving to Austin, Texas. That's what he did. So he moved, and I don't think Dan was interested in owning the business anymore. So I think Mark bought him out, and then he moved to Austin, and that's where he started Erlewine Guitars. Awesome. And then he got his own pedigree of stuff, and I mean, did work for everybody under the sun. I mean, he works on Trigger. He's, you know, I mean, it's the weight of that guitar. I mean, I've been in the shop when that guitar was in there. And it's not even talking about it, looking at it, whatever, just whatever. If I'm picking up guitars for him to work on or whatever, and it's just the weight of it being there is just amazing. It's just this massive piece of history. I was in there a couple months ago, and he just was finishing a custom build for Chris Stapleton. Of course, he has the Chiquita guitars, the small travel guitars that he designed with Billy Gibbons.
Oh, sure, okay.
That was actually the claim to fame on that. It was that it was used in the first Back to the Future movie. So at the very beginning, it's a small, tiny little yellow Chiquita guitar that he's playing through that big, massive.
Oh, the one that blew him on his back. Oh, that no doubt, really.
Line Chiquita guitar, yeah.
And I swear I saw a video once of Eddie Van Halen playing one.
Yeah. I remember seeing in the back of like Guitar Player magazine I remember seeing ads for that, the little Chiquita guitar. This is back in the 80s.
And that was a Mark Earl
thing. Yeah.
That was an Erlewine design.
Yeah. Yep.
Son of
It was,
a gun.
it was him and Billy Gibbons. Both of them. It was a team effort. Yeah.
And you know, it always made me wonder as a player, and I'm sure obviously, yeah, you're a player as well, but what's the balance? I mean, how does that thing feel to hold? If there's no weight to it, it's got to feel really awkward. Like
it's a great guitar. I can't remember what the scale length is. It's super short, but like, you know, I've worked on those before, and people have like, you know, yeah, I want to put a set of like, I want to put like, you know, I want to put 10s on here, and I'm like, you need to put 13s on here. There's nothing else that's going to work on this guitar. And I've done it. People have I want 10s. I want 10s. And I'm like, I remember one guy was arguing with me, and I said, well, let's do 11s. We'll do 11 to 49 on here. It was horrible. It was like playing, it was like spaghetti. It just didn't, you know, you need that tension, you know? So it's a funky little design. It's, but it's kind of cool. He just did a run. He just did an import run of a ton of them, and he's been selling them through his website.
Wow.
And he also has, I don't know if you've ever seen in the later years of Johnny Winter, the laser guitar. That was also an Erlewine design. It was Johnny. You ever see Johnny Winter, picture Johnny Winter with a headless guitar and the tuners are on the back of the body? That's an Erlewine laser. That's that design.
Son of a gun.
Yeah.
Wow. And I always wondered about headless guitars.
That was a real popular thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Steinbergers and
yeah. Or even now like Strandberg and stuff like that. You know,
Strandberg. I mean, yeah, that's right.
It's kind of like become the norm in certain circles. You know.
And speaking of trigger, Willie's guitar, Tom Dalia said that he's helping develop the piezo-esque kind of pickup system.
The Prism tone pickups.
Yeah, fascinating. After he told me that story, I went online and just went down this rabbit hole of exploration. It's beautiful pickup design.
Yeah, and it's amazing because that's, you know, the whole shortened long story is that, you know, Willie had this Baldwin acoustic with that pickup in it, and it got left on a stage somewhere and somebody stepped on it. So, you know, he basically wanted them to take the pickup system out of there because he still uses the Baldwin amp too, that pickup.
Wow.
So the guitar and amp was a set that you bought that came together.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure Willie still uses the Baldwin amp, and he just wanted the pickup put into a Martin. And that's Trigger, man, and that's the way it's been ever since. I was asking Mark, he talked about it, and he was saying how, you know, I said, have they ever tried to, like, you know, recreate like another guitar, like another Martin with, you know, he goes, oh yeah, there's a couple of them in there. He says, but he doesn't touch those. He always goes for Trigger, and that's it, you know.
Awesome.
And that's Mark. I think Mark gets that guitar every 6 months. He gets it twice a year just to go over it. And basically what Mark will do is, you know, that hole that's in it, that hole's getting bigger. It's just, it's not smaller. I mean, Willie doesn't play as much now as he did, but
yeah.
So every time he gets it, all that stuff is worn down to wood. So he just takes a small brush and paints lacquer, just kind of covers all the spots up, make sure there's no braces that are coming loose or broken. It's shored up around that hole. I mean, Mark's done all kinds of work to that.
It reminds me of the artists that were redoing the Sistine Chapel, just, you know, millimeter by millimeter, and eventually, you know.
You better have patience, because if you don't, it's not going to go well, you know.
Can you imagine a rig rundown video of Willie Nelson's guitar tech? Well, there's Trigger, and there's the Baldwin amp. That's the rig rundown. It's like a 5-minute rig rundown.
Yeah, really. Yeah, it could be short. You put it under a minute, you know.
That's right. What else do you want to know? I saw a rig rundown recently of Pat Metheny's guitar tech. I'm a huge Pat Metheny fan. And my God, the complexities that guy has to remember. And I've seen Pat live, and he's deceivingly simple. But he's got all these complexities in the background that drive his tour and his rig. And it's like, holy cats. The stuff this tech has to log in, just insane.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And I think, you know, I don't know, I think rigs got bigger, and, you know, I think now, you know, people like Pat Metheny, and, you know, pick anybody that's been around for 30-40 years,
sure,
they have pretty decent sized rigs, but Man, I think modern players and the way things are changing, you're starting to see smaller, simpler riffs.
Yes.
A lot of people are using modeling now.
Yeah.
Which for a national touring act, or someone that's going to tour nationally or internationally, wherever, you'd have to do that. I think. I mean, just the cost savings on freight and shipping stuff overseas and back and forth, or having rent gear where you're going, and it just, you can dial in your own thing. You know what I mean? So
right.
Changing like that a little bit,
And yes, it's convenient, but there is something to be said for the Pat Metheny guy, or heck, even Brian May's guitar tech. What Brian May's tech has to deal with is just insane. Just to get that sound with this guitar that's hand built, there's an art to it that, Kemper and all that are awesome, and you get the job done. But there's an artwork to it. I want to see Da Vinci's brush strokes in the Mona Lisa.
And I'll tell you, I'm for modeling. I mean, right here, home studio, I've got a fractal. I use that to and go through stuff. But and I'm not being a snub by saying this, but if I plug into a tube amp and then I plug into something that's digital, it doesn't mean the digital sounds bad. It sounds great. It sounds amazing. But I can tell the difference. There's a give and take, that a response thing. There's something there. I can't even really explain it, but you can tell the difference,
Absolutely.
You shouldn't have to add something into your chain to make it sound more like tubes. You know what I mean? It's
right.
If you're playing through a tube amp, it's going to sound like a tube amp,
Right. Recently I was, the gear acquisition syndrome kicked in, and I really wanted the Fender Tone Master Pro. I saw, amazing device. And so I started exploring. My friend at Sweetwater, he used to be my sales rep. Now he's my friend, because they will not let you go. Hey, Patrick, this is Frank at Sweetwater. We saw that you were looking at, he turned me on to the Helix, and he said, check out a Helix, blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting, but I'm a jazz guy, and I like clean tone. I like the Joe Pass, Grant Green, Kenny Burrell tone. Heck, even like George Benson, and I found all these YouTube videos on how to make your Helix and your Fender Tone Master Pro sound more jazz-like. And it's like, that really is that?
It's not just sound like that. You shouldn't have to make it sound like that.
That's right. It's like doing a paint by number of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. It's so you're right. There's that too.
Funny though, the tube amps have gotten to be. It's getting to be. I mean, I'm making a far jump here, but I think not too far off. It's going to be getting into like the late 50s Les Paul thing. I mean, tube amps. It's not that they're going to be rare and they're not around, but people are relying on them less and less. You know what I mean? And I don't know how things are changing as far as the music industry obviously is just nothing like it used to be. So as a studio guitar player, or a touring guitar player, or somebody that's part of a band, or I don't know, like, going forward what that looks like. I know it's going to change. It's different, but it'll be interesting to see how it changes, because why is a 59 Les Paul worth $250,000 plus? It's because there's only so many of them and everybody wants one. That's what there's plenty of tube amps out there. There's not an issue with that, but it's just an issue of people just are going to stop using them, and it's going to be that kind of niche thing where everybody has one, and maybe people record with them, maybe they don't. I don't know.
Well, and back in the 80s and early 90s, dare I say, it seemed like guitar rock was dying, kind of. And then there was a resurgence and a renaissance. We had Slash and Guns N' Roses. We had Kurt Cobain, and the garage became a pertinent thing again. And any kid could, with the 3 chords and hopes, could record a freaking song. Maybe we are getting to the point where a renaissance needs to happen again. And I think right?
No, I think so. It kind of excites me a little bit to wonder what's coming. I mean, if you talk about, when it comes to rock music and like, what guitar players, it's got to be, to me, what makes a guitar player a legend is, did they change the course of where rock guitar went after that point? You got Hendrix, you got Page, I mean, go to Chuck Berry. I mean, that's where it's really started. You know what I mean? Eddie Van Halen. But I think the last guitar idol, who I would call an idol, that's changed the course of things and done things in such a different way, even though he's not as popular, is like Tom Morello. Because Tom Morello
absolutely
does things that you wouldn't even, people wouldn't even consider it guitar playing, but it is. And
right.
I think that's what we need. We need either a person that does something different that's going to shift things up, or a band or something. Something's going to happen to shift things up,
and they need to be using the original equipment, not profilers and studio effects.
Right.
And
right.
it needs to feel real again.
Yeah. And that's what it is. I mean, and when you like, what feels real? Like, I remember,
well, that's a good point. It's relative.
My first real amp, if you could call it an amp, was a PV Backstage Plus.
Oh man, me too.
Yeah.
I loved it. A little 30 watt. Yeah.
And to me, I made it. I got a real amp,
That's right. Yeah. The big spiky PV logo on the black face. And,
that gnarly Colex that if you rub your elbow on it, you're going to bleed, that.
That's right. And the corners were real metal, like riveted in. And
that thing, I think that thing weighed as much as some 50-watt combos I have now. That thing was crazy heavy. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that I think, being in my bedroom and plugging into that amp, it's real. Whatever. I can't remember what I had for a guitar. I remember the amp. It's probably like a Cort or something cheap like that, but you just plug straight into that. And there's, I was horrible. I mean, I sucked, but you have to suck. You know what I mean? So I think that's the real feel, and that's what it is. And it's got to come from that. And got to come from a place that's genuine like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Very true. Very true. Speaking of industry changing, how do you see the repair industry changing? Is it, and that's a really tough question because it's so loaded, but obviously you do see it changing. YouTube is, I'm blown away constantly by music stores that have a guitar tech on staff and they advertise on Instagram or Facebook, hey, come and learn how to set up your own guitar for $50. I'm like, you're killing your guitar. And then the guitar tech's in the back going, hey, dude, wait a second. You're giving away all the secrets.
Yeah.
Oh,
I remember, God, when I was working I worked at Straight Music here in Austin for 3 years. I was the repair manager.
Okay.
They had a very large repair department of everything. So they had, I think at the time when I started, they had 3 guitar techs. They had an amp tech. An amp tech. He does everything electronic. Like pro audio, everything. Man, what was it? We had, I think we had 3 or 4 brass techs. There's 4 or 5 woodwind techs.
Holy cows!
See, down here, school band is huge. So that's part of our repair department was brass and woodwind.
Wow!
And it was really, really, it was a good experience for me working there. You know what I mean? Just seeing how, I'd loved working with the sitting down and just watching the woodwind techs like do their thing. A lot of ways it's similar. You know what I mean? Like working on a lot of clarinets are made out of Granadello and it's like wood and they're chipped and there's threads that pull the, one of the thumb rests out and there's, a big chunk of wood missing. So they're using Granadillo dust and glue and filling it, things like that. But, I worked there and I guess I'm trying to bring it back to like how things are changing. I think, you've got your guitar stores. There's some smaller guitar shops, that have a guitar tech that might be a little bit more like a music store and a repair shop. But then you got the bigger stores. You know, Straight Music is certainly not like Sam Ash or a Guitar Center, but here in Austin, they're big. They have 2 stores, and it's a great company, great people to work for. Clint Straight, awesome dude. He's 3rd generation. But I think I think things are changing into more like guitars are different now, right? Like, number one, quality of what you get in a cheap guitar now is better than what it used to be when we were coming up, right? I mean, you had really cheap guitars. Then you had, you know, companies like Fender and Gibson that had their entry level type stuff, like a Les Paul Studio would be considered their entry level, you know, aside from Epiphone. Then they had all their regular stuff, the regular models, you know. And now I think the price range is spread out crazy. Like, custom shop stuff is ridiculously expensive. Cheap stuff is still cheap, but there's a bunch of different grades all over the place, you know. And I think, to me, kind of what I see is, especially with really cheap acoustics, you know, I hate to say it because I'm a big advocate for, I try to save every guitar if I can, you know, not at the cost of doing stuff for free or anything, but, you know, if it can be fixed, it can be fixed. But a lot of those are, God, they're like throwaway guitars. I mean, if you get 10 years of that guitar, you're on borrowed time. You're doing really well, you know? So I think, you know, here's the thing. A lot of my customers, it was like this in Connecticut and even more so now here in Texas. A lot of my customers are boomers. They're baby boomers. And when the baby boomers are gone, like, baby boomers will spend a lot of money on getting stuff. Like, I bought this old guitar and I want to refret it, and, you know, I got this thing and it needs to be, the neck needs to be reset, and, you know, there's the bracing is messed up inside, and, you know, whatever, at 100 different things. They seem to be more willing to, but it's because I think that in the general scheme of things socially, I think that they have the money to do that. When I look at some of my customers that are in their 20s and they're pros and they're playing out, they don't have that kind of like disposable income to spend on that kind of stuff, you know. It's not to say that there aren't pros out there that are in their late 20s, early 30s and 40s that can't afford stuff, and they will come and bring me stuff. But I think that's one of the major shifts, is that once the boomers are gone, you know, what happens to all those, you know, old Gibsons and Martins, and, you know, I mean, are they just going to be handed down? You know, is the interest level going to be the same or not? I don't know. Is it?
That's a good point.
See the prices come down, but I don't know what's going to happen with that. I think that is directly related to our field and how, you know, it could change in that way too. You know, I mean, I know a lot of modern players, a lot of guys that have, you know, like we're talking about Strandbergs and a lot of these, there's 8 billion brands of headless guitars now. Fan frets, multi-scale, and stuff like that. And I think I see these players as, it's not like, oh, they can just work on their own stuff and they don't need a tech, but they're willing to do a lot more, I think, than the boomer generation or the Gen Xers or anybody after them was willing to do. You know what I mean? And those people, those groups, they would do it as well. But I think, you know, the younger generation is more of like, hey, man, I spent a lot of money on this guitar and I'm going to figure out how to get this thing to do what I need it to do, you know? And I think it's important to me. I never feel bad about anybody. Like, I think every guitar player, if they have the capability, because some people just don't have the capability, should be able to set up their own guitar to their own needs, you know?
Good point.
But, you know, what goes along with that is every guitar player thinks that, you know, when the gigs dry up and they're not making a lot of money, they're like, wow, I could set up my guitar. I could go work at a guitar shop somewhere and do repairs. And, you know, it's like being able to dial in your own guitar for your own needs is one thing. But to be able to take something and, you know, that's been sitting in a closet and clean it and figure, even if, I'm not talking about major repairs, I'm talking about just getting the thing set up. Assuming everything works, truss rod works, the frets are in decent shape. You know, there's a lot, you know, I think we all talk about setups, you know, in our field. Well, we don't talk about it. I think it's an unspoken thing that it's kind of like, it's one of the bottom of the barrel jobs. Not bottom of the barrel. Everybody needs a setup. Everybody needs to get it done. Everybody has it. But it seems to be one of It's not a big job. It's not a major job. But there's a lot to do a proper setup, man. There is just a lot to be dealt with. And through my years, I've run across quite a few techs that don't do a certain amount of things. And you can talk about okay, but I've known tons of techs, and I haven't seen it here in Texas, but when I was in Connecticut, tons of techs wouldn't even look at the nut action, like the height of the action at the nut. And to me, that's like one of the first things I check. I mean, that's as essential. I mean, first of all, is the nut in good shape? Does it need a new nut? No, it doesn't. But like every guitar off the rack, it's the slots are high. You know, that's the way they don't want anything buzzing on the rack. So, that's how they come. So it's like part of a good setup. And that's why I think a lot of times people buy something new, they bring it to you. They're like, wow, it plays so good. It's like, that's because you're fine tuning what the factory really can't do. You know what I mean? Or they couldn't do, to be honest. I mean, they have to make things kind of, a little bit harder to, because guitars are, they're fragile. They're subject to humidity and stuff like that too, But, to go back, I think everybody should be able to do their own setups, but I think that, I think people are willing to do a little bit more. You know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of people in that genre of music that will play the headless guitars and the fan frets and stuff like that. For lack of a better term, they're very technical. They're very smart, and they know they're good. They can figure stuff out. You know what I mean?
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
So I think that's another industry change that I see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a really good point. Do you have clients that say, look, I went to Guitar Center, they did this and that, can you fix it? Because obviously they can't.
Yeah. I mean, I get, it happens often. And it's not even just from Guitar Center, but it's from other tech. It's everywhere. I mean, I'd be willing to bet people have been not happy. Your customers are fickle. They're like tons of customers. So everybody's different.
Good point.
And, I'm sure people have brought in stuff that I've worked on to somebody and say, he worked on this and it didn't come out great or whatever. Don't be surprised. But I've worked on stuff where it's, all kinds of things, like, I brought this to Guitar Center and, it's one thing to not be able to do something and just own it and just be like, man, I can't do that, but when people, as a consumer, as somebody that's a guitar player, owns a guitar, free reign. You want to experiment and screw something up, that's on you. It's your guitar.
Right.
You work somewhere or you hang your own shingle and say that, I'm going to fix guitars. It just floors me that people will do things and screw things up. And I don't know, man. I guess I came up kind of with a fear of not wanting to screw things up. I don't know. I've probably, I mean, look, part of being a guitar tech is learning how to fix your own mistakes, right? Especially with finished stuff. Like you're saying, with the headstock, with the tuners, and the ferrule popping out. That's just part of it. That happens to us, But when people, man, I've seen fret jobs like where people didn't realize that they had to get the neck straight, or somebody brought me a Strat once. I think it was a US Strat. It might have been, I can't remember what it was. This was like 20 years ago, and it was, man, the frets in the middle of the neck were they were 25 thousandths high. And then then up near the higher register and up near the first, second, third, fourth frets, they were 45. And I'm like, what? They're polished, shiny, clean, but you could tell the low ones they looked wider because there was not a lot of room for, putting a crown on there, at least, because it's shorter now. So it looks flatter. Your crown, as as you're filing your frets down, your fret gets lower.
Sure.
Is the appearance that the fret is wider, but it's not. And he's like, man, I'm getting buzzes all over the place. And needs a refret. I mean, like, oh man, you know, the Guitar Center just did a fret level, and I'm like, oh, you bring it back. Tell them you want them, you know, don't tell them you want to do a refret, because if this is how they do a fret level, they're not going to do much better at refretting. You know, yeah, it kind of floors me too. I don't know why. And look, you know, I've been in this business long enough. I don't fault anybody for anything. I mean, everybody does their own thing. Everybody has their own way of doing things.
Sure.
I do not judge people, especially with customers. You know, people bring me stuff. I'm like, I brought it to so and so, and he screwed this up, and I just don't engage in that. You know, it's just like, all right, well, what do we need to do to fix it? You know,
absolutely.
But at the same time, I look at some stuff and I'm just kind of like, wow, that's just, I don't know where that's coming from. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions, Jim, for the aspiring luthier repair specialist that wants to dive in? I've had young kids come into my office and they're like, oh shit, this is what I want to do. I'm like, all right, well, here's what I did. And not too long ago, just a year ago now, became certified. And I tell them, look, I mean, for one, there is no end all be all technique, like we were talking about at the beginning. You accumulate your library of things. Don't do the fast food setup like you were talking about. Look at everything and be as thorough as you can, and embrace math, because I fucking hate math, and now I have to embrace it like it's, you know, everything is centered around the thousandth of an inch. You know, are there any suggestions that you would have? Like,
I would say, and I mean, I've had people ask me all throughout my career, like, how do I get started doing this? How do I get started doing this? And I never really used to have a good answer. I recently had somebody, sometime last year when I was still at Straight, somebody came in and I happened to be behind the service counter. And I don't know, she was maybe, I don't know, maybe in her early 20s. And she's just like, hey, I just, you know, just wanted to ask you, you know, I really love to get into guitar repair. And a lot of people will ask, like, hey man, can I come in here and just hang out with your techs for free and just watch them work? Which is a hard no.
Yeah.
Especially in that environment, you know, but she wasn't looking for that. She just wanted to know. She's like, well, like, you know, how do I go about it? Like, what do I do? You know? And I told her, I just said, well, you know, kind of pushed her into looking at one of the schools, you know, be willing to be mobile and be able to move where work is, if that'll help you out a lot. But I think more than anything, what I tell people now is, you know, if I had to do it all over again, I would, because I just, like I said, I didn't set out to do this as a career, but I love doing it. I love the work. I love working with my hands. I've always loved working with my hands. You know, back in my days working in the shop, you know, it was a job, but I enjoyed doing that. And I really enjoy this because it ties closely to, you know, me loving music and playing guitar and stuff. But I would say if you have a passion for it, like if you are burning to do this, then don't let anything stop you. Go to school, find somebody to work with, whatever, you know, put an ad, you know, on, you know, Facebook or something that you're doing only what you can handle. You're just doing setups, maybe, you know, just really don't stop. But I guess the key part of that is if you are not passionate about it, I would say do not do it. Don't do it. I don't feel like it's one thing like, well, maybe I'll do this or maybe I'll do that. You really need to have a burning desire to want to do this, because it's a hard life. It's a lot of people reach a level of success with it that they do really well for themselves. You know, I do okay for myself. I'm not, you know, by any means a billionaire, you know, I don't, you know, but I think the trade-off in that is that you do what you love. So if you can be happy doing what you love, it's great. But really, most people that ask me do not have the passion. I assume they don't have the passion. Like I said, somebody that's, you know, played guitar for years and they're like, well, you know, how do I get into this? Because I think I would be good at this and whatever. And you start talking to them and you start to realize they're looking at it as an option, not as something that they need to do. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And I think that's key. I just, if you have the passion for it, then just keep pushing and figure out how to do every next step and don't stop. But if you don't have the passion for it, go do something else, because this is going to it'll be a miserable life. If you don't, I couldn't imagine not being happy doing what I'm doing. I'd be miserable with all, all the things that you deal with, and, different customer situations that come up, and, repairs that, supposed to take you a couple hours end up taking you a week because something else happened. And it's, it could be a nightmare, and it's still frustrating. But, when you love doing, you have a passion for it, it's much easier,
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of these guys on YouTube that are like, all right, guys, I'm here in my shop. I'm going to show you how to blah, blah, blah. I swear to God, 80% of them are sighing. They're disgruntled. They're fucking pissed off. And when I first started watching these videos, I'm like, damn, am I going to turn into this kind of guy? The grumpy old, God damn it. Why did they, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's totally true.
You need a level of patience for sure.
You absolutely do. And like I said, that's where, I know I could be way more efficient, and I could probably make more money and knock out more stuff quicker. But I'm probably I'm over patient. Like, sometimes I think about things a bit too much just because I want to make sure I do things the right way, or I set things up. To just today, just before I was setting up for a bridge reglue, and I mean, God, I've done this, thousands of times. I don't know, maybe tens of thousands. I don't know. A lot. And, I just have this method, and it depends on what I'm like. This time I was using hide glue. So it's like, all right, so I get the pot set up, and I, soak my stuff and got everything ready, and I got everything getting up to temperature. I'm doing my dry fit, and I'm putting everything together, and I had to make a call for this one on the inside. So I made a nice thick call out of 1-inch plexiglass, and, I'm kind of doing the things. And little things get to you, it's like, all right, I got all this done. It's all, so everything's good. Dry fit, everything's right. Everything's good. So glue up the bridge, put it into place. I put my pins in to line it up. I put my color in. I start getting everything. I go to grab my clamps, and I didn't grab clamps. They were like on the other side of the shop. Now, it didn't make a difference. It didn't ruin anything.
Right.
Stupid
it's
things.
5 steps away from your project to go grab them.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating that it's not,
right. And in my mind, I'm thinking, hide glue, I got to work. I need to get this going. So can you imagine, not loving what you're doing and then having issues like that? It would just be miserable.
Someone, if it hasn't happened yet, it reminds me of the book a long time ago in college. I dabbled in it. I didn't read it thoroughly, but The Zen of Motorcycle Maintenance, I think it was called.
Mm-hmm.
And I think someone needs to write a book for us.
Oh yeah,
because there is the collective. Here's what I'm about to do. I'm going to look at it from all the angles before I even touch anything. I need patience. I need to know when to walk away, because there have been plenty of times where it's like, I'm going to fucking get this thing to go. And eventually you just have to stop yourself, breathe, come back tomorrow. You know what I mean? There's a whole elevatedness to it that I really appreciate. You do walk. It's kind of like being a player. You walk away on cloud 9, like, holy fuck, I just played some great shit just sitting down in my studio for an hour, and you have that runner's high. Yeah. When a job is working out and things are clicking and pieces are falling into place, you're doing it methodically, there is kind of a runner's high about it. That when you walk away, job well done, right?
Well, I think a lot of times, for me, I think I'm like a junkie for that. You know what I mean? It's like part of it is just coming up how I came up, and I had a lot of good mentors growing up in a shop like that. That
huge
taught me about just shop stuff, not guitar specific stuff, but just how to do things. And I think that you learn how to do this stuff, and you want to do things the right way, and you do them the right way, and you do things, but there's no denying that it feels good when somebody is just super stoked about a repair you did, whether it's a setup that on a clean Strat, fairly simple job, and people are like, oh my, this plays better than it ever did. I've had this guitar for 10 years, never played this good, you know.
Yeah.
Or when you do the 46 Martin, you know, and it's a restoration, and it's, you know, you're bringing it back, and it's you know, people's reactions to stuff like that. It's not why I do it, but you can't deny that that's just a good part of it. It just makes you feel good, even when you screw up, right? You make a mistake. You one time I remember, man, I was putting a battery box in a red strap. It was like Ferrari red. It was like
red. A brand new routing job.
Yep. Red as red can be. And this is a big proponent for why I don't like people bringing me parts. He brought me the battery box he wanted to use. And of course, it was a flat style battery. It's like the 9-volt went in flat instead of lengthwise or tall, which I don't have a template for, which is no problem. I'll make one, you know. So I can't remember what I did. I overrouted it. I didn't overroute it. I was drilling relief holes before I routed, and I had kind of marked. I can't remember how I did it, but one of the relief holes was too far over, and the battery box just didn't cover it. I mean, it just didn't. It was a sliver. But this is a brand new guitar too, you know. So I had to call a guy and be like, you know, hey man, look, I'm really sorry. I'm going to fix it, but I'm telling you. I said, you know, here's a couple of different options that we can do, you know. He's like, no, if it's in the back, and it's just, I sent him a picture, and, you know, so you take something that it was a mistake, and then when he ends up, you know, something that's giving you a lot of stress and a lot of agita, and you're like, oh my God, this is the worst moment of my life. And then you come pick it up, and they're super stoked, and they're happy with it. That's the same. It's, you know, you turn it around into that, you know.
Yeah,
and that's, absolutely. You know, and somebody really does need to write a book for us, because man, there's like tons of that. You know, there's so many different nuances to it, and let's face it, we're all a little weird too. You know what I mean? Like to get locked into this way of life, man, it's not just a, you know, hey, I'll go to college and become an accountant. You know, it's totally different. You know, it's we all have a little bit of a nuttiness to us to.
And you know what, Jim, that's a good point. You know, the Luth group it's almost like an AA meeting. You go to the Luthathons where everyone's in their shop, or people sitting at there. Just show up. I mean, I've pitched a few questions and got great answers. But one day I said, look, and it was a quiet moment where no one's saying anything, because a lot of people just turn it on in the background and let it go. And I said, wow, I have a question. Why does every luthier have facial hair? Is there something there? I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. But it's true, man. It's there. I mean, I'm thinking about it now. There's everybody in town that I'm thinking of.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
I'll tell you an Eric Johnson story. So,
please do.
He used to come into Guitar Res, right? Now, it was when I had started working at Guitar Res. This was about 2018, I think. This was before then. But he would always go in there, and for them, he was looking for speakers. Just, hey, got any speakers? You know, like old Celestians, whatever. Sometimes they had them, sometimes they didn't. But when they did have them, his way of checking them out to see if they were good was he'd go in the amp room, and he'd sit down on the floor with his back against the wall. He'd grab any guitar, any amp head, and he'd just kind of like loosely wired up. They'd let him do his own thing, you know, and he'd take the frame of the speaker, and he'd put the cone like down onto his shins, and he'd plug it in, and he'd play, and he'd know from whatever. I don't know if it was by feel or a tone or something, but he always put them on top of his shins, and he'd be like, nope, not this one, not this one. And then he'd be like, oh, this one's good. I'll take this one. So yeah.
God,
Yeah.
I wish we could find out what that magic was. What are you feeling in your shins?
Well, look, it's no different than the, what is it? 7.2 volts is the optimal voltage, you know, for a drive pedal. I mean, that's the same thing with Eric Johnson. It's like, it's a dying battery, but it's drawing, and I know there's something to, he's not crazy. There is something to that, but I think everybody has a certain level of,
Sure.
how can I put it? Like a certain level of what people can notice and pick up. For me, like one thing, it took me a long time. Actually, it wasn't until I moved to Texas. After working on all these acoustic guitars for all these years, you know, Jim Lehman, who owned Guitar Resurrection, they just closed last year. This guy, super, super finicky ear when it comes to acoustics. Like, he carried Taylors for a while. He stopped carrying them. He's like, they sound like crap. I don't like them. I'm not going to carry them. So he's but he loves like Santa Cruz, Loudon, a lot of these just niche builders, you know, those aren't really niche builders anymore. They're bigger companies, but he also dealt with like niche builders, and it would be like, what is, you know, he'd play something like, oh, that sounds great. And then he'd pick something else up and he'd be like, this sounds horrible. And in my ear, I'm like, I can hear that they sound different, but I don't go to the horrible and awesome. I don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was there for 2 years. And in 2 years, I started getting a sense of what he was talking about, you know? And I love Taylors. I think Taylors, I put them in the category with like Ernie Ball and PRS. They're super great with quality control.
Mm-hmm.
Consistent how they make things. Now, people can argue it's not an old Woody sounding Martin, right? Or it's an old Woody sounding Gibson. But I don't know. To me, they are bright. They're bright guitars.
Yes, that's the word that came to mind when you were talking about the sound difference. I own a Taylor, and I remember pulling it out of the box, and I'm like, oh, 714 CE with the. I love the way they do their preamp, though. Just the 3 simple knobs. It's not a giant blackfish and an ugly thing. Mm-hmm. And I pulled it out of the box, and I'm like, "Jang! Wow, that is not what I was expecting."
Yeah.
It's a very bright sound.
I think you can sum it up by it's a modern acoustic. You know, doesn't mean
that's a good point.
Acoustic that was built recently. It's just a more modern design.
Yeah.
And apparently that design has a brighter sound to it. You know, some people hate them, some people love them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But then you pick up like a Santa Cruz, you know, like God, I don't know, like anything, like a Tony Rice Santa Cruz, or, you know, anything like a, you know, their version of a D18 or something.
Okay.
They are a company that has taken everything good about an old Martin, right? And some of them are good, some of them are dogs, right? They're just like any other Gibsons, Fenders, whatever. But everything that's awesome about the best Martins, and they've figured out how to dial that in, and it's super consistent. Wow. So, you know, when we talk about, you know, the idiosyncrasies of like what makes somebody think like putting a speaker on my legs, like what am I? You're right. I have no clue if it's a sound thing, if it's a feel, whatever. Maybe if it's ripped, maybe you can feel it somehow, and I don't know. But
maybe the shin is like the closest contact to the bone that you can get in your body. Maybe, and if it reverberates through my leg bones, that's the one. Well, now I need Rick Beato to sit down with Eric Johnson again and ask him that question.
Exactly right. I'll get on the horn. We'll get Rick on the phone and get that happening.
Rick needs to do a YouTube video on the guitar tech aspect of it. He's interviewed drummers, guitarists, bassists, musicians, producers. Great interviewer. I used to live in the Atlanta area, and I still wanted to reach out to him and just. This is back before, like 5 or 6 years ago, and say, dude, I'm following your videos. You're awesome. I'd love to meet you. Now he's practically untouchable, probably.
Oh, I like that. I like the idea of that. I mean, he could. There's a lot of different ways he can go. He can go to the guitar tech luthier route. You know, he can also go into, you know, road techs. You know what I mean? Like techs for, you know, people that have done it their whole lives. You know.
Yeah.
Those are the guys and girls that have stories. They have things to really talk about because they've got the experience, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Jim, I don't want to take any more of your time. I know it's super valuable. You're a super busy guy, and I
like this.
I ask everyone at the end, and you've probably researched it. I'm blown away at how much research a lot of people put into this answer. Oh, I spent all week thinking about it. But if you were to put 3 guitar tunes on your Desert Island Guitar mixtape, which 3 guitar tunes would you pick and why?
So I will tell you, I have thought a lot about this, and that's a loaded question because there's a lot of different ways you could go. Like, am I picking stuff that was really influential to me? Or, I was talking to a buddy of mine about it, and he's just like, yeah, but you're going to be on a desert island and you're going to listen to this over and over again. So the matter of it was influential. Is it worth that? So totally screwed me up. I'm like, oh my God, I got to rethink this whole thing, And then I started thinking, like, am I looking at like guitar players and specific things? And then I just kind of backed off and just said, what are songs that I always go back to and listen to again and again, right? So I would say first one on my list is I'm the One by Van Halen. So it's off the first record.
Yeah.
It's got a super awesome shuffly groove. It's Van Halen came out of nowhere with, obviously Eddie had this totally unique sound, a totally unique way of playing. But man,
isn't that the one where he does the harmonics? Is that the one?
I think you're thinking of Mean Street. That's the beginning.
I'm probably okay.
Just tapping the harmonics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this one it's like a really fast-paced kind of like shuffle. And it's like you listen to that song and you can really hear Alex Van Halen and Eddie Van Halen. They've got this groove, this kind of boogie woogie kind of thing that's just awesome. I could listen to that song over and over. The solo to that song is just amazing. It's just the progression of it. Awesome. I'm
going to revisit it. Thank you. I'm going to revisit that album.
And
it's been too long.
Like, me starting off doing any of this stuff, it's kind of like the perfect storm of a lot of things. But one key part of it was discovering Van Halen. And I discovered Van Halen probably somewhere in the early 80s, like maybe 82, 83. I was probably like 11 or 12 years old. And the coolest thing about it for me was not what I was hearing, although that was just totally blew me away and made me want to play guitar. I just wanted to be able to do that. But the other side of it is like, man, his guitars all look like pieces of shit. They all look like these hobbled together. And so I really got into it and started being like, man, like he didn't like it, so he changed it. And so that obviously him as a musician, big influence on me, but also as just, I wouldn't call him a guitar tech per se, but the fact that he did what he did and like figured out a way, like, well, you can have a Les Paul or a Strat. Well, I want kind of both. So you figured out how to do that, So that always blew me away. So I was trying to think like, what's the Van Halen song? And that's the one, man. Yeah, look it up. You'll know it when you hear it, and it's
well, I remember the lyrics. I'm the one you read. Yeah. I remember the tune, but I gotta revisit it. It's been decades.
The way he's playing the rhythm, his right hand in that song is just unbelievable. It's just it's the hardest song to learn. I swear to God. You have to look it up again. Let's give it a listen. It's good.
Awesome.
Number 2, I'll kind of cheat a little bit on this one, but I will pick a specific song. But I could almost say any Zeppelin song I would be happy with on a Desert Island tape. However, the one I'll pick, and it's man, I thought for a while it was going to be Stairway to Heaven, and I knew that would be like, that's
how cliche.
It's the front runner, Zeppelin tune,
Yeah.
But the thing about Stairway to Heaven is it's an amazing composition, and it's one of the greatest guitar solos. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But what I ended up going with is what's the song? It's my favorite Zepp song is the Rain Song.
Oh,
the song
that tune.
I have a guitar here. It's an Epiphone that's I don't even know what it's an Epiphone acoustic that fell off the wall somewhere and got trashed, but it still holds string tension. So that's my Rain Song guitar. That's always
you've got the alternate tuning set up. It's all
and Yeah, and I always come back to that song. It's just a great.
It's beautiful, beautiful Zepp tune, man.
Yeah, it's just and it just show you. I mean, it's like you talk about Eddie Van Halen. I mean, same thing with Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
Somebody that like changed the path and inspired other people to think outside of the box. So, and that you talk about alternate tunings and things like what I mean. It's just
the moment I discovered that Guitar Player magazine, I think it was '84, came out with the Rain song Tablature. And I was like such a newbie to tablature, and I remember playing it going, that sounds an alternate tuning. Yeah. Because I was playing on a standard tuning. but once you discovered it, I was sitting for hours in this alternate tuning, making up, there's like a gate, you can do all these Gaelic kind of, the old Gaelic origins of, and I was just all over the fretboard. I mean, songs were just pouring out.
Yeah.
So I can understand keeping your guitar there.
Absolutely. It's my Rain song guitar. Like, I'm like,
absolutely.
I can't keep retuning something. I got to have something just for that,
Yeah.
And how that first, How awesome was tablature when you first discovered tablature in the 80s?
Jim, I'm telling you, it blew my mind up. Yeah, and I that's where I learned the blues scale. It was an Eric Clapton article in Guitar Player magazine, and they always had 3 tunes, and then they'd always have the bass transcript for 1 tune.
Yeah,
and that's when that's when my world blew open. And I remember one issue. They actually, I feel sorry for the guy who they had do it, but they had a dude sit down and transcribe Jimi Hendrix' Star Spangled Banner. I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? It almost seemed blasphemy. It's untouchable. You can't do it. Don't do it. Just let it be,
Yeah.
But it blows my mind, Jim. I hate to say this. I really hate to say this. The young kids that come in and pick up their guitars and I sit down with them and I'm talking about music and where they're going with as a player and what they do and how they're learning. None of them knows how to read tablature. And it's sad because, man, these guys, I mean, they're learning everything from TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, but there's a level of musicianship that when you look at the transcript with the notation at the top, you're really learning. And I think they're losing that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be an elitist about it because whatever gets the player to where they want to go.
I don't think it's elitist. I think, at the time, actually not at the time, years after tablature had come out and I kind of leaned on tablature a lot, I almost felt guilty about it because at the time it almost felt like cheating. Like I'm not reading music. There's no staff here. There's no, you know what I mean? It's like, it's literally like paint by numbers, right? I mean, it's just telling you this finger, this string, this fret, do this. But I'll tell you, when I started playing and, I'd get a, record or an 8-track or a cassette of something I wanted to learn, and I'd over and listen and listen and listen. And I could make it sound kind of like what I was hearing, but it was always like in the wrong position or out of, and you're like, wow, how can I stretch? I can't do this. And it made it more difficult because I didn't take guitar lessons, which was a fault of mine. I should have, it probably would have done me more better as a player. But man, I tell you, when I first, I think like there's little bits and pieces in Guitar Player, but when Guitar for the Practicing Musician came out, and they have like, I don't know, what is it, like 4 tab songs per episode.
That's the magazine I meant to say. Thank you. Guitar for the Practicing Musician.
That was their thing. It was the tab magazine. And I remember having a subscription to that magazine and so many things I learned, even things like, God, like just songs that I wasn't even interested in, but the tab was there. So I knew the song, I was familiar with it, I could learn it. And then you feel good because you learned something,
And they were very open-minded with their transcripts. Like, that's how I discovered Al Di Meola. I didn't know who the hell that was. Or Santana did a song, Caravanserai, right? And all I knew was Black Magic Woman. It's like, suddenly you're going down this rabbit hole of wow, look at what he's doing in this tablature. Suddenly I'm like trying to find the recording, you know,
Yeah.
and I suddenly your world just blows wide open.
Oh yeah. I remember for me, the one was, it was Soul Man by Sam and Dave. And I remember it being in
absolutely.
there. In my world back then, I mean, I was
Matt
in hard
Guitar, what was his name? Matt Guitar Murphy.
Murphy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Matt Guitar Murphy did it with the Blues Brothers, but was he the original guy?
I think he was in Sam. Maybe not. I could be wrong on that. He's well known beyond the Blues Brothers, although he was awesome, the Blues Brothers. But yeah, I remember, you know, when I came across that, you know, I mean, I loved Van Halen, and I loved like metal and hard rock. That's you know, but you know, I know this song, and it's like, well, let me look at the tab, and like all of a sudden I'm playing this song, and I'm like, holy crap, man, I can play this. Like, this is cool. I got to practice it a bit, but I can do this, you know?
Yeah.
And I do still think it shouldn't be, well, it's not a thing anymore, but if it was, and at the time, it shouldn't have ever been a substitute for learning. You know what I mean? I mean,
right.
I'm more of a proponent for it than I was when I was young, because, well, even when you talk about guitar repair, I didn't, like I said, I didn't practice with anybody. I didn't apprentice with anybody. I didn't work for anybody. I just did it on my own, you know, but it just opened my doors, because I, you know, on my own ear and not having any knowledge of anything about the fretboard, I'm just picking out notes. I know how to tune the guitar, and that's it. And I'm trying to figure it out. So that was a total game changer for me, you know?
Absolutely. And you know, that leads me into thinking it once you discovered, you know, Soul Man, the opening riff and all that, suddenly you're like, oh, you know what? I think I heard Jimmy Page do that little, you know, thing right here and that too. Suddenly you're like making these connections, which I don't think a lot of the kids today learning on Instagram and TikTok and all that get that connection. They're not, this is me personally, because the guitarist isn't, hey, you know, let me spend the first 5 minutes of this YouTube video telling you who my influences were. And I love hearing them say, well, Jimi Hendrix, and, you know, keep these legends alive, because the connection the thread is there. Eddie Van Halen's passing. I mean, thank God there's a whole generation that are still going to keep him alive.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's where it is. And I think he has to live there for a while till somebody comes around, put it in the forefront. And to be honest with you, you know, like I hear a lot of people say, like, oh, you know, rock is dead, and the rock guitar god is dead, and it's all gone, and the guitar music's gone, and whatever. It's not gone. It's kind of gone a little underground, you know, and I don't like that. I'm okay looking for it. If I have to look a little harder to find it, I don't care if I don't turn on the radio and I don't hear what I want to hear. I'll look for it. I'll find it. And there's stuff out there. I mean, there's guitar players like Guthrie Govan, the Aristocrats. I mean, I'll put that on the shop for like a week and just rotate all their albums. It's great. It's awesome to me. Yeah. I wouldn't call him newer or modern, because I'm pretty sure he's probably my age or maybe a little bit younger, but to me, it's like, all right, cool. This is guitar-based music. I found something. I like it. So you can find it. You just got to look, you know?
Yeah. And I feel sorry for my wife today, because the passing of Dickie Betts made me pull out my Allman Brothers, and I'm sure she thinks I'm turning to country music. What the hell are you listening to? He'll be. That was another great instrumentalist.
That's a huge loss, man. That's really, to me, that's like an end of an era. I mean, and it doesn't mean that playing stops. I mean, you got like Derek Trucks. There's people out there that are completely influenced by that type of playing that are carrying the torch right now. And there's many more of them, you know. But you know, you know, we only have so long on this earth, and then you know, you're fortunate enough to be on this earth to have experienced the things that you did, and experience things like, you know, we love guitar and playing guitar, and you know, have the players around that, you know, were able to be around when we were alive. You know what I mean? And as they pass, things just change, and they move, and they morph into something else, and everybody's afraid of change, and it's a good thing, though. You know what I mean? And like I said before,
it is.
really interested to see where things do go. You know, a lot of people are afraid and angry and, you know, mad that, you know, and it's the thing against like the boomer guitar players and the millennial guitar players. It's like, you shouldn't ever see anything that's against anything.
No.
You know, it's just that's where guitar playing is right now. So I'm watching it. I want to know where it goes, you know, and I'm excited by that. I love the idea that it's going to go someplace different, you know, and maybe, who knows, it might be a thing where it's guitar isn't even a big part of popular music, but something else new is going to come around. Who knows? You know what I mean?
We did pick the right instrument because I think there is an approachability to guitar that anyone of any level, you can be playing around a campfire, you can be playing on stage. To me, it's, you know, my wife is a cello player. She thinks it's the greatest instrument in the world. But there's something about guitar that just transcends all of the generations. It transcends musical style. You can plug it into any style, honestly.
Yeah, really.
I mean, DJs are sampling guitar tracks to, you know, and putting them on mixing boards to. So there is something to be said about that. I do think guitar will probably pretty much always be there.
I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's like I said, it's just changing, and we don't know where it's going. And I'm kind of excited. It's almost like being alive, like in the '60s before Hendrix came out. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, you had Clapton and Beck, and you had other people that were starting to kind of show up, but before they all hit, like, you know, what was guitar playing then? It was like I said, it was Chuck Berry, it was Elvis. You know what I mean? It was like it was starting to come out of the whole, you know, orchestra thing where the guy sits there with a, you know, hollow body and nobody can hear him. You know what I mean? You can even go back as far as Charlie Christian and say that. Well,
I was just thinking of Charlie Christian. Yeah,
and I think that's probably the beginning of popular guitar improvisation as far as a lead instrument versus just, you know, playing chords, you know.
Agreed.
So it's, to me, like, imagine being alive in that time frame, not knowing what's coming in. I mean, if you heard something like Van Halen back then, you'd probably vomit. It's nothing.
That's true.
You have to go through the progression to get there, but
that's true.
But I think that's why a lot of people now are kind of like fearful of like, well, you know, what's going to happen. And to me, I'm excited about it. I think it's a good thing.
Absolutely. You know? What would your third tune be?
My last song, this one I thought really hard about. Now, I don't know if it counts because I don't think this is actually on a record, but if you can burn it to a disc or something, I don't know. It would be Tommy Emmanuel's version of Classical Gas, but not his.
Oh, yeah.
He has a recorded version that's really good too, but it's with a full orchestra and band and stuff.
Okay, just like Mason Williams originally did it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But his live version of that song, I mean, you can look up YouTube. There's 80 billion versions of it.
Yeah,
it's just I cannot listen to that enough. I can't.
Tommy Emmanuel, his sense of musicality is just phenomenal.
Yeah,
it's like watching a chef make an omelet or watching. You know, I mean, yeah, it's 3 eggs cracked in a pan with the right amount of oil or whatever, but now suddenly you're watching Julia Child make an omelet. And it's just, there's...
and there's a certain level, I don't know, how do I want to put this? There's a certain level that artists in general, but musicians specifically, get to where they've honed their craft so much, and it's either a combination of natural talent and hard work, or all hard work, or more natural talent, less hard, whatever it is, they got to a point where it's second nature. And once they get to that point where it's second nature, like, you know, it's amazing, you know, and they'll tell you, just like I'm saying about my stuff, you know, you can always learn. There's always something new to learn. There's always another way to do something. And the best players are always open to that, do that. I've heard tons of interviews with Tommy Emmanuel, and he's always said that. And when you watch him, it's just that's the thing that, well, it pisses us off too, right? It's so effortless. It's like, God, you know, but you know what? If I did nothing but play guitar all day long, you know, I might be able to get there. I think I would. I don't know, but maybe, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
It's that level when you watch somebody like that just kind of, it floors me. It blows me away. I mean, I think about that as far as drummers. It's weird. I don't know how I became a guitar player because I love drummers. I love drums.
Oh, yeah.
I should have been a drummer, and I just totally geek out and nerd out when I watch interviews with drummers, and it's the same thing. Yeah. Even playing with I've been in so many bands and I played with a bunch of drummers, all amazing, awesome drummers.
Right.
But the level, when you play with somebody that's next level like that, and it's hard to put a description on it, but it's basically what I was just saying about Tommy Emmanuel. It's a totally different experience,
It's interesting you bring up drummers because I follow Drumeo on YouTube.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And they had the bio of Jeff Porcaro recently. Yeah. And they talked about you've got those drummers that can drag behind the 16th or be ahead of it or on it. And he had that, talk about feel. Guitarists and other musicians can have feel, but the drummer's feel is going to dictate everything else about the song, whether it's a groove, whether it's a nice shuffle. It's the nuances. And Tommy Emmanuel has that natural nuancy thing.
Yeah.
That you're talking about. That's where it's second nature.
And it's almost like a language that we don't understand.
That's right.
Understands it, and it's fluent, and it just works, and it comes out.
Agreed.
You talk about drummers, and you talk about John Bonham's got to be the best rock drummer ever.
Amen.
Everybody talks about Bonham's shuffle, right?
Yeah.
Fool in the Rain. But Jeff Porcaro, Rosanna. That I don't think anything trumps that. If you listen to that isolated drum track, the hair is standing up my arms right now. Just think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And he's back to relying on the influences and listening.
Mm-hmm.
Porcaro in so many interviews said, "Look, yes, it's original to me, but there's a bit of Purdy in there. There's a bit of these guys in here that were my influences, and I just took what their library and made my own." My own version of the Purdy shuffle, if you will, and he'll be the first to say, listen, just listen.
Yeah.
And it comes back to Tommy Emmanuel in his interview with Rick Beato. He said, look, the song, you need to be courteous to the song and understand that what you're doing is for the song. As long as you always keep that in mind, everything else is just going to fall into place.
Yeah.
Great choices, Jim. Great choices.
Yeah. Took a lot, but there you go.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
What's your favorite tool in your toolbox? Do you have one?
Yeah, it's funny. I thought about this one too, and I had a couple of picks that were really unusual that you probably haven't heard before that I kind of trumped for what is my favorite tool right now. But one thing is an O-ring pick. I use an O-ring pick to do everything. So basically, this specific O-ring pick, it's basically like a metal handle. And it's like an awl on one side, so it just comes through a sharp point. The other side has a 90-degree bent little angle on it with a sharp point. And I use that for everything. I use it to fish, I'll put it in the end pin hole in an acoustic, and with my other hand, stick the hand in there to grab the jack and grab it, pull it out. I can measure with that little right angle how thick the neck block is, so how far to put the nut. I use it as all. I use it for everything. But I'm getting into that. But the one I decided to pick was and I just got this about 3 months ago. Was the Proper Guitar Workstation, Doug Proper's Guitar Workstation.
Oh,
it is total game changer. Completely 100% game changer. I've always worked on a bench. Everything I've done is on a bench. I have different neck rests when I'm doing fretwork and things like that. And And I started seeing videos about this. And, I've always been interested in the Erlewine neck jig. And I never pulled the trigger on it. But for years, I've always thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more specific to holding the guitar and making sure that the neck is where it was when it was under string tension, right? Because you have the rods underneath. You measure with the dial indicators when it's under string tension. You take the strings off, and then you basically just raise and lower those rods till you get the dial indicator where you want it to go. So it's made for that. But the proper workstation is really made for just holding the guitar. And you can turn it. I have it mounted to one of my benches, and I can turn the guitar down to me like this. I can turn it up like this. I can, and I stand more now. Like I sit and stand like a combination of work. I've always had like, back problems because I'm tall, I'm 6'3", and people come into my shop sometimes and are like, man, like these benches, like you need a step stool to get up to these benches. But I'm like, I'm tall. People are like, well, it's supposed to be, the flat palms of your hands when you're standing up. That's supposed to be like counter height, like that's
okay. Yeah.
That's not my shop. I'm even working in here. I need to be comfortable. So I've always kind of gone back and forth. Is it more comfortable to sit doing some things? One thing I have to sit is always when I'm doing electronics and soldering and stuff. I don't know what it is. It's a mental thing. Sure. I have to do that. I have to sit, get a light, focus, lean, horrible posture. It's just what I do. But everything else, like it's gotten me from sitting down more. And it's just, I can stand. And when I'm standing, the guitar is right here. And plus the maneuverability to be able to put it wherever you want it.
Yeah. Is that where can you buy that? Does he have a website?
It's on it's manufactured through, it's called Total Vice. So just do a search for Total Vice. I can't remember if it's totalvice.com, but that company, they also have a ton of different kinds of like pedestal. I think it's made primarily in Doug's shop. He designed it to be mounted to the floor with a pedestal. When I get more room, I'll definitely do that. But the Total Vice, they have all kinds of different vices, and they have adapters. I've got my Stu-Mac guitar vice, and I've also got the green Pattern Makers one that's was made off of. But I have a plate that bolts to the bottom of that, so I can, and it's got a round sleeve on the bottom, and that's what the proper workstation. That's how that's mounted. It's got a pole on the bottom that mounts in there. I could take that out. I could put my vice on there. So now my vice can move and twist and turn like this too. So
nice. And I've seen he's shown up on the he's had group sessions on the Luth group talking about it. Yeah.
Oh, it is just I had watched the Erlewine neck jig for so long, and when I started watching stuff on this, I'm like, you know what? This is what I wanted and never knew it, And it was an investment. It's probably the most money I've spent on any singular tool in the past, I don't know, 20 years maybe.
Pays for itself.
Totally worth it. I mean, like right now I'm doing a YouTube series on I'm restoring a Jackson from the early.
I saw that one, and that reminds me. I want to come back to this. You're creating tools. You used the wire stripper with blue masking tape on it to pop out those little string guides at the bridge. I'm like, wow, that's ingenious. I've always wondered. I mean, I can see you getting your fingernail in there, a little bit, and then you get it in there and pop them out. But I'm like, I love and that's one of these things that I'm diverting from the subject, but creating tools and creating things to get a task done. It's fun. It's a puzzle.
And that's what I meant before by saying, sometimes you don't know what you're going to, like, how am I going to get this thing out of here? Well, you figure it out. And I know what not to do. I know how to mess up the guitar, so I don't want to do that. So
I know how not to get ferrules out of the headstock of an Epiphone.
You'll never forget now.
That's exactly right.
But on this one, so I'm doing like the part of, I haven't posted a video on that in months because I've just been super busy. But the part I'm working on now is I'm just doing a lot of, there's a few chips on the body and on the neck and the back of the neck and the headstock. So there's one on top of the headstock, right where it meets the nut. And, I can't remember what angle Jackson is. It's not like Gibson. I think it's probably more like 13 degrees or something, whatever it's angled back. So I've got it in the proper workstation. And what's so cool is I'm able to just adjust the workstation so that the headstock is now put a level on it. It's flat. So when I'm doing blowout stuff, I don't have to worry about it running, or I don't have to try to prop something up on my bench to get it level. With the workstation, man, you just turn it, twist it, put it to where it's got to go. And it's just, I mean, there isn't anything that I've thrown at it to try to use that didn't work out. Like there's nothing yet been like, well, I can't do this on there. Yeah. I've done full refrets on it by using the jaws because I'll use a fret press. I'll hammer sometimes, sometimes a combination. I'll use, but the jaws, for the first time in my career, I've used that for specific singular things, but never to do a whole fret job. Now I'm doing a whole fret job because I've got everything mounted there. I'm doing all my work on the fretboard, like, you know, getting the radius true and getting rid of divots, fixing any inlay problems, cleaning the frets up. I'm doing all that there. The next step, put the frets in. It's right there. So boom, put them in. It's just, it works out really good. Yeah.
Wow. As a side note, I think Jackson headstocks are the worst freaking design ever.
They are.
Break angle on the high E, literally, if you look at it, it's off the headstock in some cases.
So I think they're the most awesome looking headstocks, but they are the absolute worst for ergonomics when it comes to
terrible.
This specific one doesn't have a Floyd Rose, doesn't have a tremolo on it. So, and it's a pretty high end guitar from the early 2000s. So it's got a bone nut on it.
Okay.
And at that time, and I remember this from back in the day, they cut the nut slots so that they're perfectly in line with where the tuner's going. Like you'll see that on a Gibson a lot, and it just kind of like flays out a little bit in the middle, and then it gets a little bit more straight at the ends.
Sure.
But on this specific guitar, it's so far, that high E string tuner is so far over that you're right. If you look at the guitar from behind the headstock, the E string is off the headstock because it's so far over. So I know
you can hang your laundry on it.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
It gets me off the bench. I don't go nuts from looking at the same, 4 different guitars all day long, you know.
I swear I'm going to start every repair specialist video with, "Hi, my name is Patrick, and I'm a repair specialist." Hi, Patrick.
Right. If you have a meeting with a bunch of techs, everybody gets the red ball. Whoever has the red ball can speak. You know.
There you go. Jim, thanks again for your time, man. I wish you all the very best, and I appreciate you being with me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Patrick. I really appreciate it. I hope to talk to you soon, man.